The story begins in a dark, tense moment where a man is trapped under a guillotine. The blade, sharp and menacing, hovers just above his neck, casting a shadow over his head. His green eyes are empty, filled with dread, as he wonders how things escalated to this point. The crowd watches in silence, with one woman questioning the man's fate only to be scolded by another, warning her to stay silent. In this harsh time of war, ordinary people like them are forced to keep quiet as they have no power against those who rule over them. War has ravaged the continent, and the noble house of Manhwa is now one of its victims. The green-eyed man, a member of this house, kneels before the execution device, waiting for his death. He reflects on how the strong rule as they wish while the weak are left to survive by risking everything, hoping they won't become prey to the vultures above. The continent has been reduced to a hellish landscape where the weak must endure suffering and face their inevitable end. Lord Alan de Sylvester, the ruler of a rival clan, watches the scene with cruel satisfaction. His grin reveals his delight at the suffering of others. He orders the execution to proceed, but the young executioner, who oddly resembles the victim, hesitates. His hands tremble as he moves toward the guillotine, his heart heavy with the burden of his task. The Lord's impatience grows, urging the boy to act quickly. With the rope finally cut, the sharp blade falls, ending the life of the man. The executioner is left horrified as the blood splashes on his face and the chilling truth of the moment settles in. Blood dripped quietly, almost forgotten, just like the tears that ran down his face. The smell of iron hung thick in the air, painting a dark truth that couldn't be ignored. The young boy had been forced to carry out a heavy fate, cutting the final bond between the mortal world and his own father. The lifeless body on the ground belonged to the man who once held him in his arms, the one who gave him life. The boy now stood there, the reflection of that man in his own hollow eyes. He was just a child, yet he had become the executioner of his own kin. He had become the head of a once feared noble house, taking over at the age of just 14. This house, once known across the land for its necromancy, had faded into old stories. Now, as the new lord, he sat at a long table, surrounded by angry voices. The nobles were shouting, arguing over threats from a rival house that grew stronger each day. Some feared an invasion and demanded immediate action. One figure from the government pressed him for a decision, insisting that time was running out. But the boy didn't answer right away. He simply told them to wait a little longer. He needed more time. That response didn't sit well with the others. The fall of their house felt close, and his silence only added to their fear. Later, the boy stood alone before the portraits of his parents. Their faces looked down at him, but they could no longer guide him. He wished they could speak even once, but the dead remained silent. Still, he longed to know what they would do if they were in his place. With no answer, he continued walking until he reached a grand door. Above it hung the image of the founder of their house, a powerful figure who had once been the only necromancer on the continent. Back then, their name brought fear, and victory followed them into every battle. But since that golden age, no one in the family had truly inherited that great power. The house began to crumble, and now the weight of its future rested on the shoulders of a single boy. He let out a tired sigh. He had killed his own father. Now he walked into the study, brushing dust off an old book, the record of their family's past. The founder was more like a legend. With a single gesture, he could crush his enemies, raising armies of the dead that swept across the battlefield like a storm. In less than 2 months, the eastern lands had fallen under the control of the new ruler of House Manhwa. People whispered that the founder of the house had once made a pact with the demon Manhwa, unlocking the secrets of necromancy through a powerful book known as the Necronomicon. This mysterious black book, with a single eye on its cover, had been passed down through generations and was the key to their rise as masters of necromancy. Now, the young heir stood before it, flipping through its ancient pages. Suddenly, a voice called out to him. Confused, Leon wondered how a voice could reach him inside a room protected by anti-magic. He asked who was speaking. The voice told him not to be afraid and said it meant no harm. Before he could react, a red magic circle appeared beneath him, releasing a bright flash. When he opened his eyes, a massive demonic beast stood before him. Leon was shocked. The demon asked if his father had never mentioned him. Surprised, Leon asked if the demon truly knew his father. The beast confirmed it and said the bond between him and Leon's father had been broken, so he had come to see the boy instead. He asked who had killed his father, and Leon quietly admitted that he had done it himself. The demon grew furious and demanded the truth again. Leon calmly repeated that he was the one who ended his father's life, but as the demon looked deeper into his memories, he saw sorrow, blood, and pain. He realized the boy had been broken. The demon sensed a deep, terrifying power within him, something far too dark for a child. Shocked, the demon introduced himself as Marba, a former demon of hell and the one who first gave House Marba its necromancy. The young boy quickly recognized the demon standing before him. It was Marba, the very same demon who had taught House Marba the forbidden art of necromancy. Marba had once been a mighty figure, but now he was bound to the Necronomicon. Leon couldn't understand why this great lion had abandoned his house in the end. His anger was clear as he spoke of the family's decline in necromantic power, especially since the time of their progenitor, Lord Wellen. The demon listened to the boy's words and then explained that the real reason House Marba couldn't produce a true necromancer was that none of them were strong enough to bear the power. Leon was silent, reflecting on the demon's words. It was clear to him that their bloodline had weakened over time and the loss of their necromantic power was a sign of that decline. As Leon accepted the demon's explanation, Marba asked if the boy had come to terms with the death of his father. Leon responded coldly, saying that it didn't matter to him. However, he had one favor to ask of Marba, despite knowing that demons don't grant favors lightly. Marba, curious, questioned the boy's intentions. Leon boldly requested the power of necromancy from the demon. He asked if Marba could grant him this power, confident in his potential. Marba was amused, wondering what the boy could possibly offer in return for such a favor. Leon argued that his survival in the presence of the demon proved his worth. Marba, still skeptical, laughed at the idea that the boy could offer anything of value, but he acknowledged that Leon did show potential. Marba, amused by the boy's offer, agreed to form a pact with Leon. When Leon asked the price, the demon grinned wickedly and revealed that he would claim every part of Leon's being. Leon, with a sinister smile, accepted the price without hesitation, saying he would gladly give up every part of his existence. Marba, momentarily startled by the boy's wicked expression, realized that the young lord was serious. Meanwhile, in the council room, the nobles were plotting behind Leon's back. The old man, who was Leon's uncle, spoke up about how Leon lacked the authority to make important decisions for the house. The uncle planned to take over as the steward of the house, claiming that the young patriarch was too inexperienced. As the council members agreed, one noble argued that Leon, being too young, should not be left in charge of crucial matters. He believed the uncle, Sir Kirchel, was the better choice to lead. However, another noble, the mustache noble, opposed this motion. He argued that as the direct descendant of the previous patriarch, Leon should retain leadership. Yet, the slick-haired noble pushed for the uncle, pointing out that they were at risk of being wiped out by the approaching Sylvester Brigand's army. Tensions rose as the mustache noble slammed his hand on the table, accusing the others of abandoning the house's legacy. He emphasized that they should fight for survival, not bicker over leadership. Even though the young lord hadn't formed his own faction yet, the mustache noble refused to let the uncle steal his rightful place as heir. To him, the uncle was just as cruel and dangerous as the man who had killed their former lord. Deep inside, Mustache hoped the spirit of their late master would guide him. He hated that such a wicked man was trying to take control. The uncle, amused, mocked his loyalty, saying the boy had at least one follower. But Mustache had no patience for games. While he was loyal, he lacked the cleverness needed for politics. The uncle, full of tricks, already knew he had one. No other noble had spoken up, and Mustache, whose name was Poland, was left worried. The uncle didn't care about his opinion and told him to stay silent for the good of his family. Poland, realizing he had been used as a pawn from the start, prayed for forgiveness from his late master for failing to protect the house. Meanwhile, the boy was busy forming his bond with the great demon Marba. As they finalized their pact, the lion-like demon noticed that something was missing. The strength of the bond wasn't as strong as it had been with the boy's father. The boy recalled that demons needed magic from their human partners to stay strong. He asked what he had to do next. Marba said there was little he could do for now but suggested they train using the boy's limited mana. With a snap, Marba turned into a smaller, fluffier form that would be easier to maintain, resembling a black kitten. The boy thought it looked cute, but the demon flared with rage, warning him never to call him adorable again. Though the demon now looked like a fluffy black kitten, he threatened to cover the boy's face with scratches if he dared call him cute again. The boy wasn't scared, but he agreed for the sake of their mission. The kitten huffed and said it was time to leave. The boy asked where they were going. Since he wanted power equal to his ancestor, it made sense to follow the same path his forefather once walked. So, their next destination was the secret shrine of the boy's predecessor. While he left without knowing that his noble title had already been stolen, he was focused only on becoming stronger. The demon warned him that the journey could be deadly, but the boy didn't care. His determination made the demon proud. They walked into the forest known as the Mistwoods, which was only accessible to Marbaza's bloodline. The boy remembered that only the true patriarch could enter the secret shrine. It was believed the shrine gave the power of necromancy, yet none of his ancestors had succeeded. The kitten explained why the trial required the user to possess pure black mana, the element of the abyss. No one had ever met that condition until now. With a raised paw, the kitten cleared the fog and revealed a door to the shrine. The boy was allowed entry, but he had to face the trial alone. The kitten's last advice was to follow the book's instructions, the Necronomicon, to gain necromancy. Inside, the boy found lamps glowing green. Then, goblins appeared and a girl was tied up nearby. As the goblins charged, the boy calmly opened his magical book. The first rule said he had to take a life to raise the dead. He had done it before. Holding his dagger tightly, the boy's eyes glowed with deadly focus. He stepped forward as one of the goblins screamed, "Murder!" The boy remained calm as the goblin attacked, dodging the strike and swiftly slashing the creature with his knife. Clearly, he had sharpened his skills after committing patricide. With blood spilling around him, his glowing eyes searched for the next opponent. A memory struck him, standing in a cemetery while his father taught him about their clan's deepest value, reverence for death. Though they were necromancers, feared across the land, his father reminded him that power did not have to mean cruelty. Instead, he made his son promise that if he ever had control over someone's life or death, he would ensure their end was peaceful. Now, that promise echoed in his mind as he faced a group of goblins. They had a helpless woman tied up, their twisted smiles full of wicked desire. He had already cut down one goblin with a precise strike to the neck and now stood surrounded by more. They had no grief for the fallen, only hunger for violence. Still, the boy stayed calm, remembering to strike with accuracy rather than power, aiming for swift kills. The kitten watched in awe, surprised by the boy's precision despite his lack of formal sword training. Was it luck or an inborn gift? He was eager to find out as more goblins attacked. The boy knew he couldn't rely on luck for long. The darkness made things harder, but he forced his senses to adjust. He remembered that killing a goblin caused a torch to flicker out. Still, he pressed forward, piercing through enemies with precise movements. His weapon struck true again, and with another pained scream, another goblin fell, taking another torch's light with it. Another goblin rushed at the boy with a wild screech, its speed surprising. But the noble stayed calm and dodged at the perfect moment, avoiding the deadly swing. Two goblins attacked him from opposite sides and ended up clashing with each other. Using their distraction, the boy swiftly slit the throat of another goblin, ending it in one clean move. His eyes were now used to the darkness, and he could see even if the torches went out. Still, his ceremonial dagger was weakening. It wasn't made for long battles and had started to dull. Suddenly, another goblin screamed and charged. The boy quickly slashed at its face, but the wound was shallow, just a tiny scratch. Seeing this, the lion demon was shocked when the boy dropped his weapon. But with quick reflexes, the boy dodged again and grabbed a fallen goblin's blade. His eyes gleamed sharply as he lunged forward with greater strength and speed. This time, his attack was powerful, cutting deep into the goblin's body and leaving it in pieces. With that, the last enemy dropped and the boy stood tall, victorious. He walked slowly toward the girl tied up in the dungeon. She was terrified yet hopeful, tears falling as he removed the rope from her mouth. She thanked him, full of emotion. But before she could say much, he suddenly stabbed her. The hero who saved her life was now her end. She looked into his empty eyes, shocked as he pulled his bloody sword out. He explained calmly that his father had once warned him of monsters that could mimic humans. Her final scream revealed her true form, with claws out and her monstrous nature exposed. The boy remembered another lesson from his father: those who betray trust and deceive others should never be allowed to walk away peacefully. They must feel the same fear they caused their victims. With cold green eyes and quiet anger, the boy turned to the demon girl, deciding she needed to suffer for her lies. Her loud screams echoed through the dark dungeon as he punished her, and then the final torch went out, leaving them in complete darkness. Far away from the dungeon, a grand banquet was in full swing. Beautiful women in red dresses danced and entertained the crowd. Laughter filled the air, and at the center of it all was the boy's uncle, celebrating his rising power. He had finally set his wicked plans in motion and believed that soon the entire noble house would be his. Two women clung to him, laughing and cheering him on, mostly because they were after his wealth. The uncle enjoyed their praise and drank heavily, boasting about how smart he was to use the enemy family to gain power. He made a secret deal with the Sylvesters, betraying his own people. The women flattered him even more, calling him a real man for being so cunning. The uncle laughed loudly, saying he'd rather bow to the Sylvesters than let his nephew lead. He believed the boy would ruin House Marba and drag it into destruction. In his eyes, he had already won the battle for power. The room laughed with him, especially one slick-haired man who had supported him from the start. This man, however, now wanted to know what had become of the boy. The boy had disappeared, and the slick-haired man grew curious about how they planned to eliminate him. The boy's father had earned deep loyalty from the people, so getting rid of the heir wouldn't be easy. But the uncle wasn't worried. With a wicked grin, he revealed his plan. Once the boy was dead, no one would question it. After all, the dead can't speak, and neither can their sons. Slick Hair agreed, joking that the last time the dead ever spoke was centuries ago when a Marba patriarch used necromancy. Laughter filled the air, more drinks were poured, and a toast was raised to the new, so-called rightful leader of the house, Sir Kirchel. The party continued with loud drunkenness and dancing girls. Elsewhere, the leader of House Sylvester made sure his plan to crush House Marba was moving along well. His allies confirmed that everything was on track. Kirchel was just a pawn, unaware that the Sylvester Lord had no intention of holding back his second strike. The man laughed at how easily the fools walked into his trap. He had already taken the boy's father's life and now looked forward to the boy's downfall too. Victory was near and he ordered preparations to move faster. Meanwhile, deep underground, the boy finished off the last monster. His sword was soaked in blood and he stood alone in the darkness. A sudden flash lit the area and fire filled the room. Exhausted, he ran a hand through his hair. The demon Marba was thrilled, saying he had never seen such a crazy contractor. The boy had even killed the demon girl without hesitation. Covered in blood, he gently put the kitten down, hoping to avoid any future run-ins with orcs. The boy paused as he thought about the demon's question. His answer was simple. When all the other torches had gone out, one still remained lit, which meant one monster was left, and the only one left at that time had been the girl. The demon was impressed by how calmly the boy had figured this out in such a stressful situation. He explained that when they had first entered the underground, the torches had burned green, a color that marked death and goblins. Each time he killed a monster, a torch went out. But after the last one green torch still glowed. That's when he knew the girl had to be a monster too. Even though her death was more brutal than the others, he didn't hesitate. The kitten demon admired how cold and sharp the boy was. At just 14, he had handled the danger like a grown warrior. Covered in blood, the boy just looked around calmly, and the demon could tell he wasn't just gifted with a large mana pool. He might be hiding something much deeper. Curious and excited, the demon lifted the necromancy book to begin the next lesson. Now that the boy had taken lives, it was time to raise the dead. He was to focus his mana through his eyes and look at the bodies. As he did, glowing threads appeared, lines that connected the dead to another world. These were called death lines. With guidance, he separated their souls, infused his mana into the bodies, and raised the goblins as undead. A purple glow surrounded them and they now shared the boy's dark smile. One undead even charged at him but couldn't harm him because this was part of the process called branding, used only on monsters. The boy stood up, ready to try controlling the undead on his own, but before beginning he had a serious question for the demon. He asked if turning a human into the undead was harder than turning a monster. The demon smirked and asked who the boy wanted to raise. Without hesitation, the boy named his uncle, Kirchel von Marba, as the one he wanted to turn into a corpse. Meanwhile, the uncle was living a carefree life, drinking, laughing, and surrounded by women. He acted foolishly, feeling powerful after the boy's father had died, thinking there was no threat left. Suddenly, loud rumbling shook the building, making the old man alert. He knew the building was protected by magic, so this kind of quake shouldn't have been possible. Just then, the boy entered, his cold eyes glowing with lightning flashing behind him. The uncle was amused and not afraid, mocking the boy and calling him unworthy of being a patriarch. He reminded the boy that his father was dead and couldn't protect him anymore. But the boy stood firm, pushing aside the curtains and stepping closer. He declared that he wasn't afraid because now he had the power to protect himself. The uncle mocked him again, laughing at the idea that the boy came alone. But Leon answered coldly, saying that it was bold of the old man to think that he had come alone. The uncle looked confused as the building shook again. This time he sensed something far more terrifying and ancient magic he hadn't felt in years. It was the dark energy of the abyss. Panic crept into his eyes as he realized his worst fear was coming true. Suddenly goblins burst into the room. They weren't ordinary creatures, they were undead. The boy calmly confirmed it, declaring that House Marba had once again become a clan of necromancers. Furious and terrified, the old man ordered his guards to kill the undead. The guards charged forward with weapons aiming for the boy. But before they could strike, the undead goblins attacked first, moving quickly to defend their master. One guard was instantly sliced, falling in a pool of blood before the uncle's eyes. The others followed, taken down one by one as the room filled with screams and blood. The uncle stared in disbelief. He had completely underestimated the boy who now stood calmly, surrounded by death. The room was filled with the groans of dying men, and the uncle finally accepted the horrifying truth: his nephew was commanding the undead with true necromancer powers. Still in shock, the uncle tried to fight back. He gathered dark energy into his hand, forming a glowing purple orb. But he couldn't understand how this was possible. He shouted that the boy's power was a disgrace to the family's legacy. The boy, however, showed no emotion. He calmly stated that as the head of House Marba, it was only natural that he held the power of necromancy. The old man refused to believe the boy's words, thinking they were nonsense. But the boy remained calm and warned his uncle that proving his power wouldn't end well for him. His dark eyes grew even more threatening as the goblins moved toward the old man. With wicked grins, the goblins charged forward, and surprisingly, the old man didn't back down. He stood his ground and shouted for the monsters to return to the abyss, shooting a blast of purple fire at them. One goblin burned and crumbled into ash, making the old man believe he had the upper hand. But that was a mistake. The damaged goblin suddenly lunged back, still alive and furious. The uncle called for his guards only to realize they were already dead. Panicking, he threw more magic at the boy, but the goblins dodged and pressed in, swords ready. The uncle tried to convince himself he still had control, but he knew his drunken state weakened him. He yelled at the boy about betrayal, ignoring the fact that he had planned to betray him first. Suddenly, a goblin stabbed him in the chest. Blood poured from his wound, and his magic began to fall apart. Weak and bleeding, he accused the boy of turning against family. The boy calmly reminded him of something he once read with his father: history always divides people into victors and the defeated. And forgiveness, he said, was a right only the victor could claim. Now standing beside his uncle, the boy reminded him of the betrayal he committed against his father. But things had changed. As the old man cursed him, the boy promised he'd never forget this day, the day of the old man's defeat. The boy had no intention of letting the old man live another day. As punishment, he took away his chance to see tomorrow. The goblins leapt forward with wild excitement and cut the man down in the name of their house's true leader. His screams of pain were like music to the boy's ears. When the man finally died, his hand dropped lifelessly, and the goblins continued to hack away at his body even after death. Watching this brutal scene, the boy's small companion realized that the child truly had a twisted mind, so much so that even a devil might be impressed. The boy, despite being a beginner, had shown remarkable control over the undead, as if he had years of experience. He stared ahead, then smiled darkly as a new idea came to him, one that likely only he would find amusing. The next day, a council meeting was called, and most nobles were present, though confused. They were told the meeting had been summoned by the old man, so they wondered why it was held again so soon. Some feared that war with another house was near, but others calmed the room, saying such actions would need the king's approval. While they waited for the council head, footsteps echoed through the hall. To their shock, it wasn't the old man but the boy who entered. The nobles were puzzled. He walked silently to his seat, then finally spoke. He confirmed that his uncle would not be attending, and in fact, he never would again because he was dead. The boy announced proudly that he had killed him. The room went silent as horror filled the nobles' eyes. They couldn't believe what they'd just heard. One of the nobles slammed his fist on the table, demanding a proper explanation. If the boy's words were true, then their leader had a lot more explaining to do. How could the oldest elder of House Marba die so suddenly, especially when they hadn't even finished mourning the previous head? The boy agreed it was a good question and said he had a very good answer. The room filled with shouts from other nobles, saying that even if he was the new patriarch, he still owed them a proper explanation. The boy stared at them coldly and declared that the old man was a traitor. That shut everyone up. They already knew the truth deep down. The old man had betrayed the boy's father and shared secrets with House Sylvester. He even tried to steal the boy's rightful position. Now, the nobles who had supported the old man began to sweat nervously. What confused the boy most was why these nobles were still defending someone who clearly deserved to die. That made them even more uncomfortable. They had all shown up because they believed the old man was still in charge. But now that he was missing, it made the boy's claim more believable. One noble said it was foolish of the old man to be killed by a young boy. Others panicked, realizing that if the boy had killed him all by himself, then none of them were safe. A noble jumped up and pretended to be shocked at the old man's crimes, while another quickly claimed he knew nothing. The boy simply tapped the table and ordered them to be quiet. Even if they were innocent, their failure to notice a traitor made them all guilty in his eyes. The nobles silently cursed themselves for falling into the boy's trap. One of them, trying to remain calm, asked for proof. How could they be sure the man the boy killed was really a traitor? What if he had slain an innocent man? The boy listened, then stood up and said that their actions had been predicted by someone far wiser than him. The nobles had no idea who he meant, unaware of the cheeky creature sitting quietly on his shoulder. That mystery would remain unsolved. The boy then opened a large book of necromancy, declaring that he would now prove the betrayal. A dark aura spread through the council chamber, terrifying the nobles. He called out as a trueborn of House Marba, summoning a cursed soul from the underworld. To their horror, a squad of cackling undead goblins emerged, weapons in hand. More undead poured out of the book as if spilling from a bucket. The nobles were horrified to see such terrifying magic from a boy so young. Then, from the depths of the underworld, the rotting body of the old man rose. His clothes were in tatters as he cracked and groaned his way back to the world of the living. The nobles stared in disbelief. Somehow, the boy had unlocked forgotten necromantic powers of their house. He demanded that his undead uncle confess. The undead figure, without hesitation, declared that every noble present had known about the treachery and had supported it. Panic followed. One noble tried to escape, only to lose his head. Another begged for his life, but the boy reminded them that the meeting wasn't over yet. No one would leave until he said so. The nobles broke down in fear, crying and begging the boy to forgive them. They swore to confess their crimes and prove their loyalty, but the boy showed no mercy. These were the same men whose betrayal forced him to execute his own father. One by one, they were all cut down. As the boy stood among their corpses, he declared that the dark art of necromancy had officially returned to House Marba. Holding his necromancer's book high, he made this proclamation with power in his voice. He then looked around and asked where Sir Polland had gone. A nervous brunette servant replied that Sir Polland had been thrown into the dungeon for sedition. The boy asked to be led there. The servant obeyed quickly, eager to avoid the same fate as the nobles. Before leaving, the boy paused and told the remaining staff they were free to flee if they wanted. He warned that he wouldn't be responsible for what happened next if they chose to stay. He then left the silent room, leaving the terrified servants behind.